Attraction, deflection, and interference are advanced tactical ideas that are not seen too often at the lower levels of chess, but among master play, they're actually pretty common. Let's have a look. Here in this first game, this was 1966 World Championship match, Grandmasters Tigran Petrosian and Boris Spassky. Petrosian's white, he's the defending world's champion, and he's worked hard to get to this position, and now you can see, playing white, his knight could simply capture the rook that's on f7. But he would only gain like 2 points, right? A rook's worth 5, knights are worth 3. And so he had a plan to get a lot more than that. So he plays Queen h8. And what this does is it attracts the king into the corner where now the rook will be captured for free with a fork. Spassky actually resigned right now. So if he captures it, then the knight takes, forking the king and the queen. Let's look at our next example. Now, in this example, I was actually playing the game. I was white, just a casual game. And I played Queen c2, attacking the knight and pinning it to the king. And my opponent made the wrong choice. He plays bishop to f5 to guard it. And now the only thing protecting it is his bishop guarding the knight. So I deflected his bishop. By playing pawn to g4, now that gets his bishop to move away from protecting the knight. And that's called deflection. I get to take that and win material. Now, in this example, we're going to look at a game by Grandmaster Rohan from 2006. He's playing black in this position against a lower rated player, but still a strong player, 2300 something. And white plays rook b6. He leaves the back rank weak, and Grandmaster Rohan goes in, check. But now comes the fun part. And it doesn't look like there's much happening here, but after this simple check, rook h1, it attracts the king to the h1 square, and so now when he captures, the queen gets to come in and take the pawn because the g-pawn's pinned. And he actually resigned as soon as rook h1 was played. After this, of course, it would be checkmate. Now here's a fun little side note to help us with our lesson, is that the idea is to attract the king to h1, but if the king had gone out to g3, now Rohan can checkmate with the pawn if only that h3 pawn is out of the way, and he can deflect it by playing the queen to g4 check, and that deflects that pawn out of the way so that the black pawn can push up to h4 for checkmate. Excellent examples there. Now, one of my favorite players from history is Grandmaster Tony Miles. He was a very creative player. He's playing white in this game, and it looks like he might have missed a tactic by his opponent. Bishop takes c3. Oh my goodness. Now, if the pawn takes the bishop, of course, then that deflects the pawn out of the way, and black's queen takes at a2 for mate. Well, Miles was ready for this. He plays queen takes f7 check, and when the king comes over, Miles sees, okay, I could capture at g7 except for this darn bishop on c3, or I could capture on e8. Ah, darn it, there's this rook here. Now, if we look at the rook guarding on the e file and the bishop guarding on that long diagonal, the square where they intersect, where they come together, those two lines, is e5. And perhaps you're guessing what move Tony Miles played right now. He played bishop e5. And his opponent resigned. This is called interference, and it blocks the line. So now if the bishop takes, for example, then that blocks the protection to the rook on e8. Check, check, checkmate. Or if the rook captures on e5, then it's just over in one move. Queen takes g7 mate. All right, so that's interference. Now I created this fun position in which it looks like white's in a tough situation. The pawn wants to promote on h8, but the rook is there. This knight's about to move in the action. It's guarded by this rook. And you might think, oh, I know. I'm going to push the pawn to deflect the rook so I can take the knight. Well, it's better than that. White plays f4 check. And this is a fun combination of interference, attraction, or deflection. So first of all, it's interfering with the fourth rank protection of the knight. So if the pawn takes, for example, the king can simply take the knight, and next he's going to capture the pawn on a5. Same thing would happen if black just left the pawn there and played king e6. The king gets to capture the knight. If the king captures, then he sets up for a skewer, check. So he's attracted the king to that fourth rank for the skewer, and now the pawn will promote. And finally, of course, if the rook captures it, then that's deflected the rook away from the h-file, and the pawn, once again, can safely promote. So that's it for attraction, deflection, and interference. I'll check you later.